Hi, this is Mr. Bradstreet, and welcome to Biology 1, Unit 12.2. In this podcast, we're going to talk about community ecology. So, remind you guys of the sequence over here: organisms, populations, and communities. So, a community is a group of populations. So, all of the living things of different species in the same area, same time. So like I said, a community is all the organisms that live together in a particular place. So community ecology is essentially the study of those interactions between the different populations, how those different species interact with each other. Okay, we mentioned this term briefly the other day, but just to remind you, a niche is an organism's ecological role. So if a habitat is where it lives, the niche is its job. And so it's what it eats, where it lives, when it's active. And there's a couple of different things that influence that. We can have a couple of different things. We can have a fundamental niche, and we can have a realized niche. The fundamental niche is its potential, where it can potentially live. Whereas realized niche is its reality, where it actually lives. And sometimes those are the same, sometimes those are different. Like, for example, you see here in these barnacles that the fundamental niche of this species up here is it has the ability to live anywhere from here all the way down to here. This top barnacle species can live anywhere along that whole coast, from high tide all the way down to low tide and below. But in reality, it only lives right here. And the reason for that is that this area is already taken up with somebody else. There's competition. So it really only lives in the area. It's not as good of a competitor, so it only lives up here in the area where there's no competition. So fundamentally, it can live. So if we take these guys out, it would be able to live this whole area. But in reality, just that part right there. And so related to that is this idea of the competitive exclusion principle. If two species are living together in the same area, and they have basically the same niche, one's going to be a better competitor than the other, and is going to exclude that other species from the area. So one's going to be a winner, one's going to be a loser. So no two similar species can occupy the exact same niche at the same time. One of them's going to get excluded if they do. So when we look at interspecific interactions with community ecology, they basically fall into four main categories. These symbiotic categories. And remember, sym means same. Bio means life. So symbiotic means organisms that live in a close association with each other. So we can have competition, where they're both, which is negative, they're fighting over a limited resource, so they both have less. There's predation or parasitism, where one is being harmed, negative, and one is being benefited. There's mutualism, where both species involved benefit. And then there's commensalism, where one species is benefited and the other species isn't affected at all. So let's give you a couple examples of these. So this one, clownfish and sea anemones. That one's mutualism. Plus. Both species are benefited. The sea anemone is benefited by having the clownfish kind of clean out its tentacles and keep things right. Whereas the the clownfish is benefited by, it's one of the few species that can go inside the sea anemone without getting stung. They have a special mucus on their skin which keeps them from being stung, so they can go in there and be safe. So it's mutually beneficial. Okay, this one. These water buffalo and these egrets. That one's commensalism. It would be mutualism if these egrets were eating insects off the actual water buffalo themselves. But what they do is they just kind of hang out on the back of these water buffalo, and as the water buffalo walk along through the grass, they happen to kick up bugs, and they hop off and eat some of those bugs and hop back on. So they're basically using the buffalo as a free ride through the grass and eat the bugs that they kick up. So the buffalo isn't being hurt by that. It's not being helped by that. It's really not being affected at all by that. Okay, we got a tapeworm and we got a botfly. These are definitely parasites. One species is being benefited and the other species is being harmed. Pretty easy. Okay, this is similar to parasitism with a little bit different outcome. Usually parasitism doesn't kill the host, but predation usually, if you get your face ripped off by this lion here, probably not going to end well for you. So plus minus. Okay, here, competition. They're fighting over a limited resource, be it food or water or mates, and so they're both going to be negatively impacted. Now, predation and competition in the short term might be bad, but in the long term they actually lead to natural selection and evolution. Predation and competition are things that drive evolution. So prey have to basically adapt to become faster, stronger, better at hiding. And so you see things like horn, speed, coloration. And predators have to be able to adapt to become quicker, faster, stronger to catch them, or smarter. And so predation and competition are going to drive evolution in the long term. Okay, so when we're characterizing a community, you can have look at a couple different components. You can look at species diversity, which is how many species are there total. And then you can also look at composition. Is there a dominant species? Is there a more abundant species? Is there this thing called a keystone species, which I'll tell you about on this next slide? And how does that community change any over time? Which is succession. Does the makeup of that community change? So a keystone species is a species that's very important to that ecosystem, more so than any others. So there was this experiment done where these little tidal pools along the Washington coast had about 16 or 17 species. And what they did is scientists went in and they removed one of them, starfish. And if you think, okay, we have 16 or 17 species, so remove one, then we should be left with 16 species. But that's not what happened. What happened was they had 16 or 17 species, they removed one, and then you can see right here, the number in that community went down to about 3 or 4. So obviously that starfish was very important to that ecosystem, to that community. Take them out and the whole community crashes. And the reason for that is starfish are predators. And what they would do is they controlled the mussel population, these little mollusks. And without the starfish, the mussels pretty much overpopulated, spread throughout the entire tide pool, and nothing else could live there. So that starfish plays a key ecological role in that community that goes beyond just one species. Okay, and final thing for this podcast, we're going to talk about what succession is. Succession is just the sequence of how a community changes over time, usually after some sort of disturbance. So, like for example, whenever Mount St. Helens back in the early 80s blew up in Washington, that whole area for miles surrounding was just laid bare. But over the last 20, 30 years or so, life has been coming back. Little grass maybe at first, some weeds, some trees are starting to come back. And so that process of how it's changing and coming back is called succession. So there's two types of succession. Primary succession begins without soil. That's the key component. There's nothing there, just bare rock. So if you think about some things that lead to that, maybe like some volcanic eruptions where rock has covered that area. If a glacier comes through and wipes off everything and just leaves rock, then you're starting over with nothing. So soil has to be made first before anything else can happen. In secondary succession, the soil is still there. So there's some sort of disturbance that wipes out all the life, but it doesn't have to start over from bare rock. There's still soil there. So some things like that might be floods or fires that come in and wipe out all the living things. But this one, secondary succession, is going to be faster than primary succession because it doesn't have to start over with bare rock. The soil's still in place. And so a couple of things about succession here, a couple of terms. A pioneer species is kind of what it sounds like. Remember, pioneers were the first people to settle a certain area. So a pioneer species is, after some disturbance, the first ones to come in and settle that area are going to be things like lichens and moss. They're going to be things that can grow basically anywhere. A lot of times things that we think of as kind of weeds. Then you're going to have these things that live in high sunlight areas like grasses and different other species. As they start to grow up, you're going to have more shade-tolerant things like small bushes and trees. And eventually, you're going to come to this climax community, which is the final community of that area, which might be maybe a forest, but just a stable community. And so, oftentimes, those first species that come in are those R-selected species. Remember, these are the fast breeders. That have lots of offspring, don't really take care of them. And so these things, pioneer species are often R-selected. And they lead the way for everything else to come in. So they create better soil. When they die, they become fertilizer for the soil. And it allows other species to eventually come in. And then finally, that last word I mentioned, climax forest or climax community, is just whenever it reaches its stable final community. And so for a lot of areas of the U.S., that might be like kind of this hardwood forest area. But you go from just some mosses and grasses to grasses and weeds to small trees and bushes to finally this mature forest. And that's where it's finally reached its stable, long-term community.